There's a hidden disease killing the Western world. It doesn't attack our bodies. It attacks our ability to build, to create, to make the very things that guarantee our survival. It's called the industrial collapse pattern, a predictable 5-stage blueprint for national suicide that has played out perfectly twice in modern history. It's a pattern that always begins with a seductive promise: efficiency, cheaper goods, a modern service economy. But it always ends the same way, by hollowing out a nation's core, leaving it utterly dependent on its rivals for everything that matters: medicine, electronics, infrastructure, even military hardware. First, this pattern turned Great Britain from the workshop of the world into a financialized museum. Then, it created the American Rust Belt, leaving millions of forgotten people in the ruins of once great cities. And now, the exact same pattern has entered its final, most aggressive stage. This isn't a history lesson about something that happened. This is a real-time diagnosis of a terminal illness. And most people don't even know we're sick. What you're about to see is the 5-stage blueprint. Once you understand it, you will never look at our economy the same way again. So, what is this 5-stage blueprint? It's not a conspiracy, it's a path, a sequence of logical yet fatal decisions that a wealthy nation makes, one after the other, believing each step is a sign of progress. The pattern is so insidious because at every stage, the people in charge will tell you that everything is fine, in fact, that it's better than ever. But beneath the surface, the foundation is being sawed away. Here is the blueprint. Stage 1, the age of production. This is the golden age. A nation discovers its industrial might. It builds more than it consumes. Its factories are the engine of the world, employing millions in high-wage jobs. The nation is a creditor, self-sufficient and powerful. Stage 2, the financial seduction. The nation gets rich, so rich that making things starts to feel slow and dirty compared to making money. The smartest minds no longer go into engineering. They go to Wall Street or the City of London. The government shifts its focus from protecting factories to deregulating banks. The promise is that a service economy is more advanced. This is the great lie. Stage 3, the great hollowing out. This is when the disease becomes visible. To maximize profits, corporations are encouraged to move factories overseas for cheaper labor. The government calls it free trade. The corporations call it efficiency. But what it really is the deliberate sacrifice of the nation's productive capacity for short-term stock market gains. Entire towns die. The industrial heartland begins to rust. Stage 4, the chain of dependency. After decades of offshoring, the nation wakes up and realizes it can no longer make critical goods. It's dependent on foreign countries, often its geopolitical rivals, for everything from basic medicine to computer chips. The supply chain becomes both a lifeline and a leash. The nation has lost its independence. It can be held hostage at any time. Stage 5, the brittle kingdom. This is the final stage. On the surface, the nation looks prosperous. Its stock market might be at an all-time high. Its cities are filled with glass towers for bankers, consultants, and software engineers. But underneath, the core is hollow. The nation has no resilience. When a real crisis hits, a pandemic, a war, a resource shortage, the supply chains break, the shelves go empty, and the illusion of wealth evaporates overnight. The kingdom shatters because it was built on paper, not steel. To understand how truly deadly this pattern is, we must go back to where it first played out. We have to look at the nation that invented the modern industrial world, and then showed everyone else how to destroy it. In the 19th century, Great Britain was not just a superpower. It was the superpower. It was the first. The undisputed master of the industrial age. Its empire controlled a quarter of the globe, but its real power came from something much smaller: its factories. From the textile mills of Manchester to the shipyards of Glasgow, Britain was a humming engine of production. It earned the name the workshop of the world, and for good reason. It produced half of the world's iron, half of its coal, and nearly all of its advanced machinery. This was stage 1, the age of production in its purest form. British strength wasn't just in its navy. It was in the steel, textiles, and locomotives that it sold to every corner of the earth. But then, the disease set in. The empire had made Britain fantastically wealthy, and with that great wealth came a subtle but fatal shift in thinking. This was stage 2, the financial seduction. By the early 20th century, the City of London was booming. Making money from money through banking, insurance, and international loans seemed so much cleaner and more profitable than the hard, dirty work of manufacturing. Britain's best and brightest young men were no longer dreaming of inventing the next great engine. They were dreaming of a corner office in a London bank. The nation's focus shifted from being the world-s workshop to being the world-s banker. The pound sterling was the global reserve currency, and they believed this financial power was invincible. Then came the world wars. They were won, but at a catastrophic cost. The nation was in debt, its industries were damaged, and its global competition, particularly the United States, was catching up fast. This is where the pattern accelerated into stage 3, the Great Hollowing Out. Starting in the 1960s and 70s, what was left of Britain's mighty industrial base began to be dismantled. It wasn't just about foreign competition, it was a deliberate policy. Governments, both Labour and Conservative, embraced a new globalist vision. British coal mines were shut down, steel plants were closed, the iconic British car industry, once a world leader, was sold off piece by piece to foreign companies. It was a slow, painful process. Entire communities that had built ships or mined coal for generations were told their way of life was obsolete. They were promised a brighter future in the new service economy. For most, that future never came. By the 1990s, Britain had reached stage 4, the chain of dependency. The nation that had once supplied the world with everything now had to import almost everything. Its industrial capacity was a shadow of its former self. While London boomed as a global financial hub, the industrial heartlands of the North were left to rust. Britain was dependent on Europe for manufacturing, on the Middle East for energy, and on a global supply chain it no longer controlled. And that brings us to today. Britain is a textbook example of stage 5, the brittle kingdom. It is a wealthy, modern, service-based economy. But that wealth is fragile. We saw it during the pandemic when the nation struggled to secure basic protective equipment. We see it in the ongoing energy crises, where it is completely exposed to global price shocks. Britain still has world-class scientists, engineers, and innovators, but the nation as a whole has forgotten the fundamental lesson of its own success. Real power does not come from financial spreadsheets. It comes from the factory floor. It comes from the ability to turn raw materials into things of value. Britain was the first to walk the path of industrial collapse. But the next great power to follow the blueprint would do so on an even grander and more tragic scale: the United States of America. In 1945, the United States was not just a victor, it was a titan. The Second World War had shattered its rivals, but America's homeland was untouched, and its industrial power was unlike anything the world had ever seen. This was America's stage 1, the age of production, and it was a golden age. American factories had served as the arsenal of democracy, churning out ships, planes, and tanks that won the war. Now, that same industrial might was unleashed on a world hungry for cars, refrigerators, and televisions. Cities like Detroit, Pittsburgh, and Cleveland were the humming heart of the global economy. A factory job with a high school diploma could buy you a house, a car, and a middle-class life. Made in the USA was the undisputed global standard of quality and power. But just like Britain before it, America's success planted the seeds of its own industrial decay. The nation became incredibly wealthy, and the siren song of Wall Street grew louder and louder. This was America's turn for stage 2, the financial seduction. By the 1970s and 80s, the mindset of the elite began to change. Why build a factory in Ohio when you could make a fortune trading stocks and bonds in New York? The focus of the economy shifted from making things to moving money. Business schools taught a new generation of CEOs that their only duty was to maximize shareholder value at any cost. The long-term health of the nation's industrial base was irrelevant compared to the next quarterly earnings report, and that unlocked the door to stage 3, the Great Hollowing Out. It began with a trickle, then became a flood. In the 1980s, a new idea took hold: free trade. It sounded good in theory, but in practice it was a green light for corporations to dismantle America, piece by piece, and ship it overseas. First to Japan, then to Mexico, and finally, the ultimate prize, China. The North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, in the 1990s, and China's entry into the World Trade Organization in 2001 were the final nails in the coffin. Millions of high-paying union manufacturing jobs vanished. The great factories of the Midwest went silent one by one. The region that had built America was left to decay, earning a new, painful name, the Rust Belt. Entire communities were destroyed. They were told to learn to code. It was a cruel joke. By the 2010s, America was deep into stage 4, the chain of dependency. The country that had once supplied the world was now the world's biggest customer, with a massive trade deficit year after year. It became critically dependent on China, its primary geopolitical rival, for everything: pharmaceuticals, rare earth minerals for our military technology, electronics, machine parts. The list is endless. The COVID-19 pandemic exposed this vulnerability in the most brutal way imaginable, as Americans waited for masks and medical supplies to arrive on container ships from the very nation where the virus began. And this has brought America to the doorstep of stage 5, the brittle kingdom. On the surface, the American economy looks powerful. Silicon Valley produces billionaires. The stock market soars. But it's an illusion of strength. America's industrial core has been hollowed out and outsourced. We have forgotten how to build. We have traded the resilience of the factory for the fragility of the supply chain. The story of the Rust Belt wasn't just the end of an era. It was a dress rehearsal. It was the pattern playing out in one region of the country. But now, that same pattern is not just repeating. It is accelerating, and it is consuming the entire Western world. This is the moment where the history lesson ends and a real-time diagnosis begins. For decades, we've been told a comforting lie. The lie is that the death of our factories was a natural evolution, that we were graduating to a higher form of economy, a clean, smart, post-industrial world run on information, services, and technology. But what if that wasn't progress? What if it was just stage 3, the great hollowing out happening all over again, but this time with a digital smokescreen? Look around you. The pattern that killed the Rust Belt is now consuming what's left of our productive economy. It has just changed its disguise. We don't just offshore factories anymore. We offshore our programming to India. We offshore our customer service to the Philippines. We offshore our advanced microchip manufacturing to Taiwan, a tiny island under constant threat from our biggest rival. Our most innovative companies, like Apple, design their world-changing products in California, but have handed over their entire production, their real-world power, to factories in China. We are told that as long as we control the intellectual property, we are safe. This is the great delusion of the 21st century. The nation that can design a fighter jet is smart, but the nation that can forge the steel, machine the parts, and build the engines is the one with real power. We have willingly given that power away, and the pattern is not just an American problem anymore. It's a Western disease. Look at Germany, the industrial powerhouse of Europe. For years, it seemed immune. But now, thanks to its chain of dependency on cheap Russian energy, a chain that has now been broken, its legendary factories are facing shutdowns. The same hollowing out process that took decades in the US and UK is happening in Germany at terrifying speed. We have created an entire economic system built on a fragile assumption that the world will always be peaceful, that global shipping lanes will always be open, and that our rivals will always play by the rules. History shows this assumption is suicidal. Every stage of the blueprint is flashing red right now. The financial seduction, our stock markets have become a casino, completely detached from the health of our real economy. The hollowing out, it's happening faster than ever, not just in industry, but in technology and services. The chain of dependency, it is now a noose around our neck, held by nations that do not share our interests, which means we are standing on the precipice of the final stage. We are living in a brittle kingdom, pretending our paper wealth is the same as real-world strength. And the first shockwave from the next global crisis will prove just how wrong we are. So we come to the final, uncomfortable truth. The post-industrial dream we've been sold is a house of cards. We've built a civilization that looks incredibly sophisticated on the surface, but its foundations have been removed. We are told that our strength lies in our data, our algorithms, our financial instruments. But you cannot eat an algorithm. You cannot defend your nation with a stock portfolio. You cannot build a hospital with a banking app. Real prosperity, the kind that lasts for generations, is built on a foundation of tangible things. It's built on energy, resources, and the industrial capacity to turn them into what a society truly needs to survive and thrive. We have sacrificed that foundation for the illusion of clean, effortless digital wealth. We have become a society of talkers, traders, and managers, while outsourcing the difficult, essential work of doing and making to other parts of the world. This is the ultimate vulnerability of Stage 5, the brittle kingdom. When the next crisis hits, and it won't be a financial crisis that can be papered over by printing more money. It will be a real-world crisis, a crisis of scarcity, a crisis where container ships stop moving, where foreign factories shut down, and where nations hoard the resources they have. In that world, the only thing that will matter is what a nation can produce for itself. Who can keep the lights on? Who can build their own infrastructure? Who can make their own medicine? The countries that gave away their factories will find that their digital wealth is meaningless. The nation that controls the mines, the farms, and the assembly lines will hold all the cards. We have spent the last 50 years willingly handing those cards to our competitors. The pattern is complete. The hollowing out is almost finished, and the system is now stretched so tight that the smallest shock could shatter the entire illusion. The question is no longer if it will break, but when. And what comes next? Because history also shows that after every collapse, a new model of power emerges. And the warning signs of what that new model will be are already here, if you know where to look. We're in the middle of a global economic shift so profound it only happens once every few centuries. And understanding that shift is the first step to navigating the chaos ahead. For half a century, we've been told that the future belongs to the thinkers, the financiers, and the coders. But the pattern of history tells a different story. It shows that when fragile, complex systems break, power doesn't go to those who manage spreadsheets. It returns to those who can master the real world. The future will not belong to the consumer. It will belong to the producer. The future will not belong to the debtor. It will belong to the builder. It will belong to the nations, the communities, and the individuals who can make things. who can grow food, generate energy, and forge steel. In a world of scarcity, these are the only skills that guarantee real wealth and real independence. This isn't a call for a return to the past. This is about understanding the fundamental laws of power that never change. The industrial collapse pattern has hollowed out our economies, but it has also created a historic opportunity for those who see what's coming. While the brittle kingdom of paper wealth faces its inevitable crisis, a new economy based on real production is quietly being born. The great economic reshuffling of the 21st century has already begun. The nations that are securing resources and rebuilding their manufacturing are the ones that will lead the next 100 years. The individuals who are learning practical skills and investing in tangible assets are the ones who will not just survive, but thrive. The pattern has shown us the disease, but in that diagnosis, we can also find the cure. It starts with recognizing that we have been sold a dangerous illusion. It continues by understanding what comes next. The story of our industrial collapse is just one chapter in a much larger story of global economic change. If you want to see the other patterns and understand the forces that will define the next decade, subscribe to our channel. The answers aren't in the mainstream headlines, they're written in the past, and we'll show you how to read them.